Caitlin Clark's Nike deal should have been a victory lap. Instead, it exposed the ceiling placed on even the most dominant women in sports. $8 million over 8 years? That's just $1 million a year for a player who commands record viewership, sold-out arenas, and more social media engagement than most male counterparts. When compared to Sabrina Ionescu's reported $5 million annually, the disparity is staggering. That misstep forced Clark to reevaluate who was really looking out for her future. Enter Alan Zucker, an agent who doesn't just negotiate deals but architects empires. Now aligned with Excel Sports Management, Clark is being positioned not as a face of a brand, but as a brand herself. Her underappreciated market value is finally getting the backing it deserves, with a team built to turn her influence into long-term financial and cultural capital.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
This isn't a course correction. It's a complete reinvention. Caitlin Clark just fired her agent, Erin Kane, and replaced her with Alan Zucker. And, somehow, the sports media barely blinked. This isn't some behind-the-scenes adjustment. It's a game-changing, power-shifting, career-defining move that repositions the most visible name in women's basketball right where she belongs, at the top of the business food chain. Let's start with the facts. Clark was being wildly underrepresented, despite dominating NCAA basketball with record-breaking performances and pulling in more eyeballs than entire WNBA teams combined. She was signed to a Nike deal that gave her $8 million over 8 years. That's $1 million a year. Sounds nice until you realize players like Sabrina Ionescu, solid talent, no shade, were reportedly earning $5 million per year. Caitlin Clark's numbers didn't match her actual value. Not on paper, not in the bank. And the agent responsible for locking her into that underwhelming deal? Gone. That move alone says a lot. It says Clark isn't tolerating lowball contracts anymore. She's no longer letting others dictate what she's worth. She's taking control, and she's doing it with a high-powered agent who understands the stakes. Alan Zucker isn't just any agent. His roster includes Peyton Manning, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Trevor Lawrence, and Taylor Swift. This is elite-tier representation. His agency, Excel Sports Management, is backed by Goldman Sachs. That's institutional capital. That's deal-making leverage. That's not just someone helping you land a sneaker campaign. That's someone building your entire brand ecosystem for the next 20 years. Clark's decision to make this switch wasn't just about a contract. It was about stepping into her full value. And not just as a basketball player, as a commercial force, as a cultural icon, as a long-term brand. Because here's the truth. Caitlin Clark was doing everything right on the court, but off the court, the numbers weren't adding up. Massive viewership, sold-out games, social media buzz, and yet a fraction of the money. Her previous agent didn't read the moment. She didn't recognize the magnitude of Clark's influence or the window of opportunity it created. While fans were watching Clark dominate the court, the business side was stuck in the past, still treating her like a breakout rookie instead of the face of an entire sport. And now that's changed. Alan Zucker's entire strategy revolves around building brands that live beyond the athlete. He's known for negotiating not just contracts, but ownership deals, revenue-sharing structures, equity plays, media partnerships. This is not endorsement 101. This is graduate-level wealth building. And Caitlin Clark? She's officially enrolled. This isn't about the WNBA anymore. This is about what Clark represents to corporate America, to sports business, to entertainment. She's the bridge between traditional athletes and modern media personalities. She has the kind of reach that makes brands salivate. And now, she has someone who knows exactly how to cash in. Excel Sports doesn't just work with athletes. They transform them into industries. Manning didn't become a media giant by accident. Taylor Swift didn't dominate arenas and real estate deals without serious backing. That's the kind of path Clark is on now. One that expands her name into new territories, equity, media ventures, long-term partnerships. This is the new model. Athletes aren't just athletes anymore. They're platforms. And Zucker knows how to build one from the ground up. So let's talk about the Nike deal again. That $8 million over 8 years now looks like a lesson in what not to do. That kind of undervaluation wasn't just a missed payday. It was a signal, a sign that Clark's team wasn't playing at her level. And when you're performing at a historic pace, but your business team is still negotiating like it's 2015, that's a problem. Caitlin Clark saw it, and she made the switch. That's what makes this such a turning point. She's not just going to get paid now. She's going to own the conversation. And Zucker's approach ensures that she's not just a face in front of the brand. She'll be behind the scenes, at the table, profiting off every deal, every campaign, every future media project. We're talking about multifaceted partnerships, brand portfolios, co-branded media, production opportunities, and most importantly, equity. This is the same approach that's helped athletes build post-career empires. Clark is doing it mid-career. And let's not overlook what's happening with her game. There's been a shift. After a rough WNBA start, she's returning to her college form. Her playing style is sharper, more confident, more her. That version of Caitlin, the high-scoring, court-dominating phenom, is the most marketable version. It's the one people fell in love with. And now, her off-court strategy finally matches that energy. It's all syncing up: performance, personality, and now power. But here's what's wild. Almost no one in the mainstream media is covering this with the urgency it deserves. The biggest athlete in women's basketball just fired her agent and signed with one of the top deal makers in sports and entertainment. And it barely made headlines? That's not just a miss. It's a symptom. Women's sports are still stuck in a cycle of undercoverage, even when the stakes are massive. Clark's move is a blueprint for every undervalued athlete out there. And yet the silence around it shows how far the media still has to go in taking women's sports and the business around them seriously. But that silence isn't going to last, because Zucker doesn't do quiet. His deals don't fly under the radar. And Caitlin Clark's next move? It's going to be loud. Whether it's a restructured Nike contract, a new media production, or a branded partnership with revenue share, people will notice. She's positioned for explosive growth now. Everything going forward will be done with leverage. And not just financial leverage, but cultural. Her presence lifts the league. Her name drives viewership. Her involvement sells out arenas. Now, finally, her business team is treating that like the gold mine it is. Caitlin Clark just turned a career correction into a blueprint for the future. And for every woman in sports watching this, the message is clear. Know your worth, then act on it. Don't just ride the momentum, build something from it. Control the narrative. Restructure the deals. Fire who needs to be fired. And align with people who don't just see your talent, but know how to multiply it. So what do you think this means for the rest of the league? Is this going to force brands to stop playing small with women's sports stars? Will other athletes follow her lead and start demanding real power behind the scenes? Let us know in the comments. Like this video if you're done watching athletes get lowballed while carrying entire franchises. Share it if you think more people need to know what's really happening behind the highlight reels. And hit that subscribe button. We're not done tracking the meltdowns, comebacks, and corporate chaos driving sports and celebrity culture. The truth is, Caitlin Clark didn't just sign a new agent. She fired a warning shot at the entire industry. She exposed what happens when elite athletes are surrounded by outdated representation, stale thinking, and weak deal-making. And she reminded everyone watching that brand building isn't just about talent. It's about alignment, timing, strategy, execution, and now she is all four. Let's not sugarcoat what this switch really signals. Erin Kane had one job: secure deals that match Caitlin's value. And in a moment where Clark was leading viewership numbers, drawing unprecedented fan engagement, and turning arenas into media spectacles, she got a Nike deal that paid her less per year than athletes with a fraction of her impact. That's not just a bad deal. That's professional malpractice. And let's be very clear here. Nike knew who Caitlin Clark was. The public knew. The media, the fans, the broadcasters all knew. She was dominating the conversation, topping jersey sales, crashing broadcast ratings. You don't pull in millions of eyes during March Madness and then walk away with $1 million a year unless someone on your team didn't understand the assignment. That kind of undervaluation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when the people negotiating on your behalf don't realize you've already outgrown the room they're in. Erin Kane was playing by the old rules, where female athletes were happy to get a seat at the table, even if that table was in the back corner. Clark isn't interested in crumbs. She wants the table. And Alan Zucker? He builds tables. His entire model revolves around creating brand ecosystems. It's not about just slapping your name on a sneaker. It's about building businesses that outlive your playing career. It's about walking into a deal not as talent, but as equity. It's about making sure that for every dollar your image generates, a percentage goes back to you. This is where things change for Caitlin. We're now talking about a future where Clark isn't just featured in commercials. She's producing them. Where she's not just licensing her name to a product. She's taking a cut of the profits. Where media platforms want her not just as a guest, but as a partner. And that kind of shift can't happen with an agent who still treats success like it's optional. Zucker's connections, backed by Excel Sports Management and Goldman Sachs, open doors that most athletes never even see. Not just sportswear deals, but venture capital introductions, production partnerships, tech investments. That's where the long-term money is. That's where careers become empires. And now, Clark is positioned exactly where she needs to be. We've already seen what happens when Zucker works his playbook. Peyton Manning became a post-retirement business magnate. Giannis didn't just re-sign. He built long-term infrastructure around his brand. Taylor Swift isn't just selling albums. She's directing projects, owning her work, and reshaping the music industry model. Clark is stepping into that same machine at just 22. So when people ask, why now? The answer is simple. She couldn't afford to wait. The WNBA is growing. Women's college basketball just had a breakthrough year in viewership. Corporate America is finally beginning to see the ROI in women's sports. Caitlin Clark lit the match that made all that possible. And she was still being paid like a side act. That ends now. And let's talk about something else that's been hiding in plain sight. Caitlin's pivot back to her college playing style. After a rough rookie transition into the WNBA, where her rhythm was off and the pressure was intense, she's made a noticeable shift. She's playing faster, looser, more like herself. The version that dropped deep threes with casual confidence, ran the floor like a general, and had fans hanging on her every move. That version is back, and it's not a coincidence. When an athlete finally feels in control of their future, it shows. Her game is syncing with her brand again. And that's where the real value explodes. Because the best version of Caitlin Clark is the one who's both unstoppable on the court and untouchable off it. Brands love a comeback. They love a narrative. And Caitlin has one now. From being undervalued to taking control. From being locked into weak contracts to building a financial future. That storyline sells. And Zucker knows exactly how to monetize it. Across platforms, audiences, and markets. But let's address the elephant in the room. Why isn't the sports media screaming about this? Where are the deep dives? Where are the primetime debates? Why is one of the most important agency shifts in modern women's sports flying under the radar? Because women's sports, despite growth, impact, and undeniable numbers, are still treated like a niche. Even when the numbers scream otherwise. Even when Caitlin Clark is pulling more viewers than entire NBA playoff games. The industry still underestimates, still undervalues, still underreports. This move should have been a headline across every major outlet. And yet, it's barely a blip. But Caitlin's not waiting for the industry to catch up anymore. She's making moves as if it already has. And here's the kicker. This isn't just about money. It's about power. Because when you control your brand, your image, your financial future, you control the narrative. You decide which deals make sense. You set the price. You walk away from the noise. And that's exactly what she's doing now. It's a wake-up call for the entire sports representation world. Because if the most visible, marketable, and followed women's basketball player in the country was being handled like a mid-level client, what does that say about the system? About how many other athletes are sitting on untapped potential, stuck with agents who don't know how to scale them? Clark breaking free of that isn't just personal, it's symbolic. She's showing athletes that loyalty doesn't mean tolerating bad business. That performance on the court doesn't excuse weak contracts off it. That trusting your gut isn't risky, it's necessary. And she's making those moves early in her career, which means she's just getting started. Expect the next few years to be explosive. Deals will look different. Campaigns will be bigger. Ownership opportunities will start rolling in. And fans? They'll see the transformation in real time. Because Clark's no longer playing catch-up to her hype. She's finally positioned to meet it and surpass it. The corporate world is about to find out what happens when you properly represent a generational athlete. When you give her the tools, the leverage, and the structure to match her influence. When you stop treating her like an endorsement and start treating her like a brand in motion. And the rest of the league? They're watching. This isn't just a personal win. It's a new standard. If Caitlin Clark can say enough to mediocre deals and demand elite representation, why can't others? This could be the shift that forces athletes across all levels to ask better questions, to demand better answers, to expect better results. Caitlin Clark has done what most athletes never get the chance or the nerve to do. She saw the problem, called it out, and cut ties. She fired her agent, and not just any agent. The one who helped guide her through the early stages of her fame, who negotiated one of her most high-profile endorsement deals, and who, quite frankly, dropped the ball when it mattered most. This wasn't about drama. It was about dollars. It was about value. It was about business. Because when you're at the height of your fame, and the checks don't match the stats, something is off. And Caitlin Clark? She wasn't about to let that slide. For a long time, agents could coast off of old-school connections and mediocre deals, hoping no one would question what went on behind the scenes. But not anymore. Not in this era. Not when athletes are more than athletes. They're brands. They're platforms. They're CEOs of their own empires. And Caitlin Clark just became one. The moment she left Erin Kane behind and signed with Alan Zucker, the whole tone of her career shifted. This wasn't just a new agent. It was a new playbook. She upgraded from legacy sports rep to a business architect, from small-time strategy to institutional power, from incremental growth to exponential moves. Alan Zucker isn't in the business of playing it safe. He's in the business of creating cultural capital, of taking names and turning them into assets. And Caitlin Clark is now one of those assets. Let's really break that down. Zucker doesn't just handle contracts. He builds ecosystems. If you're one of his clients, you're not just cashing checks. You're building equity. You're creating media deals with ownership built in. You're structuring partnerships where you earn off every product sold. You're signing licensing deals that let you scale without lifting a finger. That's what Caitlin just bought into. And she didn't just do it for herself. Whether she realizes it or not, she just became a blueprint. She exposed how even the most talked about women's athlete in the country could still get stuck in an undervalued deal. She showed how even if you're breaking records and dominating headlines, you still need someone behind you who knows how to fight for every dollar. Because the truth is, sports is still an industry that undervalues women, no matter how famous they are. No matter how high the viewership is. No matter how many jerseys they sell. The system is slow to catch up. And it took Clark's own underwhelming Nike deal to prove it. $8 million over 8 years. $1 million per year. For Caitlin Clark. Compare that to other athletes whose market reach isn't even close. And yet, they're raking in 5 times as much annually. Not because they're better. Not because they're more famous. But because their agents understood their value. Negotiated aggressively. Played hardball. Demanded more. Caitlin didn't have that. Until now. And let's not downplay what Excel Sports and Zucker bring to the table. Their backing by Goldman Sachs changes the game entirely. That's institutional money. That's deal-making at a global level. That's the kind of backing that turns product endorsements into long-term company shares. That turns one campaign into a stake in the brand. With Zucker, Caitlin isn't just aligning with a savvy negotiator. She's stepping into a financial machine built to scale her brand into every vertical imaginable. Tech, entertainment, fashion, wellness, streaming. The kind of verticals that don't just pay you once, they pay you forever. This is a long-term wealth play, a strategic evolution, not just for Caitlyn, but for how female athletes manage their careers going forward. Because here's what happens next. Every up-and-coming athlete is going to start asking the hard questions. Am I being paid fairly? Am I represented by someone who understands the current market? Is my agent thinking 10 years ahead, or just cashing a commission? And every agent in the game is going to start sweating. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just leave Erin Kane. She exposed the ceiling on legacy sports management. She exposed how even a historic talent can be undervalued if the person running the deals doesn't recognize the moment. And the truth is, the moment has already changed. Women's sports are no longer a gamble. They're not a charity case. They're a profitable, data-backed, audience-heavy market. The brands who see that are moving fast. The agencies who don't, they'll be left in the dust. And let's not forget what this does to Caitlyn's brand. For months, the narrative was getting shaky. Critics were loud. Her WNBA transition wasn't as smooth as people hoped. She was getting targeted, dragged by haters, dealing with growing pains. But behind the scenes, she was sharpening her business game. Not just reacting, but repositioning. That's what this agent change really is. It's a repositioning, a reset, a rebirth, and the first real step toward controlling her post-playing narrative. Because now she's not just an athlete who sells tickets. She's a businesswoman who demands equity. That's a whole different conversation. That's a whole new power dynamic. And just wait until the next round of deals gets announced. Because Zucker doesn't work in silence. When Caitlin Clark lands a new endorsement, it's not just going to be splashy. It's going to be structured. When she steps into media deals, you better believe there's ownership involved. When she partners with brands, it's not going to be for a check. It's going to be for a seat at the table. Because that's what Zucker brings. And now, that's what Clark expects. It's a shift that's going to rattle the old guard. No more undervaluing talent, because it's just women's sports. No more slapping a name on a shoe without thinking about lifetime revenue. No more accepting the minimum, because at least it's something. Caitlin Clark didn't just fire her agent. She fired a warning shot at every company, brand, agent, and executive who still treats women's sports like it's a side gig. The message is clear. Get serious or get left behind. And here's what you can expect in the near future. New deals, smarter contracts, bigger partnerships. Not just because Clark is talented, but because she's finally got the representation to match her value. And when those numbers start getting released, when the campaigns start dropping, when the business world starts realizing how much was left on the table with her previous setup, everyone's going to look back and ask, how did Erin Kane let this happen? The answer? She underestimated her client. She failed to scale with her. And now, Caitlin Clark is doing what every athlete eventually learns they must do. Take the reins, make the hard call, and build the legacy themselves. This isn't just a contract change. It's a course correction, and it's going to define the next decade of Caitlin Clark's career. So let's talk. What do you think this means for women's sports moving forward? Are we finally going to see more athletes demand this level of strategic representation? Or will it take more breakout stars like Clark to shift the culture? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you're done watching generational talent get stuck in underwhelming deals. Share this with someone who still thinks agents don't matter. And hit that subscribe button, because we're following every twist, every pivot, and every power play shaking up the sports world. And Caitlin Clark? She's not just playing the game anymore. She's running it.